Welcome to Inksights, a publishing podcast giving you important insights into the industry. I'm Mira.
I'm Lily.
And I'm Amy. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about AI and continuing the discussion that we had with Nadim last week. We'll be reflecting on that first, and then we're going to be talking about some books that we've recently read about AI, just researching around the topic, and a very casual debate, not really a debate, but just a conversation about pros, cons of AI in publishing and where we think that's going to go, and discussions about human creativity, how we should be interacting with AI in general from now on.
Yeah, and just a quick disclaimer for whoever's watching the video version of this podcast. If you see us raising our hands, please ignore it because we do have a tendency to interrupt each other. So
yeah. If we were in person, we'd be using a wooden spoon, but sadly, that's not possible on Zoom.
We did do a trial of this episode before, and then we used the lipstick to as a talking stick, and it kept ruffling around and the audio was terrible. Yeah. But anyways, we don't have that today. Okay, so what did you guys think with last episode? What were your like spotlight moments?
Well, I found it really fascinating. It was interesting talking to Nadim, and one thing that he really emphasized that I think we were kind of surprised by, because going into it, I think lots of people have preconceived notions about how AI will be used. Loads of people are reasonably concerned about it taking people's jobs, about AI being prioritized over people's actual creativity, especially in the marketing environment. But what he was saying was that how they intend to use AI is to allow people to have more time to kind of represent themselves and be creative, and specifically to use it to market the backlist, which I don't know about you guys, but I feel like would be something massively helpful to publishers, because there's loads of books, especially with the advent of book talk, from backlists that people have rediscovered and totally loved, that they just wouldn't know about if it weren't for someone just randomly picking them up one day. And so if you had some kind of way to market those, when obviously publishers don't have the time and resources to do that normally, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also found it quite interesting, the whole sort of do we want AI to be completely obedient to what we want it to be? Do we want it to be completely seamless to what we ask? And is that potentially not creativity in the weird prompts and kind of results we get from asking it to do things? And that was definitely not a way that I'd thought of before, but it's really interesting,
In terms of creativity, it's really interesting to think about that book you read, Amy, My Child, the Algorithm.
Yeah, no. So this is the book that I read for this episode, basically. I got it at Future Book, where I met the author, who was a very lovely person, by the way. And yeah, so basically there's 3 narrative voices in this. One is the toddler, one is the author. It's quite an autobiographical sort of narrative, and the other is the toddler. And basically all 3 of them make the story of this, and it's all about kind of how can I be a good mother, and particularly a queer mother with a separated situation in terms of parenting. It's a really unique story, and it's just really, it's an interesting take on AI, because it kind of, seeing it next to the toddler, you can kind of see the similarities and the differences between them. And it's really witty. It's great. Very accessible to read, especially if you want to learn a bit more about AI, but you don't really want to just read an essay. This is a good one to do. But the AI tone was really interesting. It's a bit of a less developed kind of AI algorithm than what we have today. But in its own way, that was quite charming. It's the creativity and the AI. You get sort of things that kind of fit well with the narrative, and then ones where it's just kind of gone off the rails, but it's in a really interesting way. Sometimes you want to just skip over it because it doesn't add anything to the narrative. And I think that was all very purposeful and very interesting. Generally speaking, her take is she doesn't think AI can replace humans when it comes to writing books that are incredibly unique, because it is it's an algorithm. It's only going to output what's input into it. And for something as unique as this, a story of queer motherhood, and the difficulties that come with that, it's going to have issues. And in this book, it has issues. It gets stuck. It repeats the same word. But what she does do, and what she illustrates in this, which is really interesting, is she shows how AI can be used as a creative tool, something that can complement what you're putting into it. It can also be used as an editor, which she makes that point. I think you guys read something very different to me that week. So do you want to talk a bit about it?
We did. So we actually read Nadim's book, Shimmer, Don't Shake, How Publishing Can Embrace AI. And there is actually a chapter that's quite in this book that is quite similar to like the format of My Child, the Algorithm, which is personally my favorite chapter of the whole book. It's chapter 10 specifically for anyone who has the book with them. And so Nadim basically asks Claude, which is an AI machine, just like OpenAI, ChatGPT, and all of that. And he asks the AI to summarize the entire book in one page and then asks it to summarize it into like one paragraph and then one sentence. And the chapter is called If You Don't Want to Read It All, Claude, Help Me to Distill It. And I thought that was such a clever way to use AI and to demonstrate like the skills and the like writing ability of AI. And yeah, this book is really a really accessible take on how AI is like the advent of AI in publishing. And there's a lot of good resources and a really interesting glossary of terms on AI in chapter 2. And it's just a really good source to that is accessible to read for like anyone at any level, in my opinion. So yeah.
Oh, that's actually something I want to learn a bit more about. Were there any terms that Nadim explained in there that I had no clue about last week?
I know. Ugh, there's so many. And all of them are really important for like having important like discussions about AI. It's good to be informed about like what terms we're using and how AI works, because like it's so easy to just like spread fear mongering about AI in the publishing industry. Is AI gonna do this and that? And yeah, so it's good to be informed. And I feel like this is a great book to like start when it comes to learning about AI.
Definitely having like the way to talk about something makes something a lot less scary when you know a bit about it and when you can use the words to talk about what's going on. I feel like it makes it 10 times easier to discuss and create new things.
Yeah. I do think one thing that people need to keep in mind is exactly there's a lot of misinformation. One thing that was really useful about Nadim's book is that it was doing, like, here's my copy, I remembered it this time, is that it did a very good history of how AI has been used and how basically just like the idea that there were all of these developments, all of these new ways that we use computer systems throughout history that like when we started would have seemed completely like scary and incomprehensible, and now are completely necessary to publishing. And I do think I'm a person who's like a bit more of an AI skeptic. I do get concerned about the idea that it could replace jobs, because I think that as good as AI can become, it can never truly replace human creativity. But I would be very open to like the idea of using it for more streamlined things like data gathering, which is really useful. And I know I've spoken to some publishers, and data gathering is absolutely necessary nowadays to see, especially with people doing online shopping, to see what books people are buying, to see what they actually want to be reading and things like that. So I do think it could be really useful for things like data stuff that like takes up a lot of time from publishers and publishing assistants and marketing assistants, etc., that could be instead be used on these campaigns where there's almost never enough time to work on all of these massive marketing campaigns that need to be done. So instead, people could use the time that they're spending on data entry, etc., and data tracking to create campaigns and be more creative. And that was a really big point that Nadim made, that he was saying we don't want to take jobs away from people in terms of creativity. We want to give people more time to be creative.
It's already actually interesting that you talk about that, because we have been talking in class how it is already being used in those sort of ways. I know that there's one of the things that it's being used for is automated royalties, kind of like making sure that that's going out perfectly and stuff like that. And I said it last week and I'll kind of repeat it slightly, but I think that with me, one of the interesting ways that Nadim was talking about the how the AI can be used to read a book and tell you the themes and things like that I find that very interesting because I think that when it comes to recommending a book, you can never not read it page to page, because I think if you do that, well, if you don't do that, you run the risk that you might be recommending something to someone inappropriately. It could have something horrendous in the next 10 pages and you wouldn't know because you didn't read it. Or it could just have a like horrendously sad ending, and someone like Lily wouldn't really want that.
Yeah, I have to admit that I hate a sad ending, and it would be really useful. And sometimes, like with booksellers, people will tell you, and I personally am a bookseller, so yeah, I'll let you finish your point in a second. But like, it would be really useful to know in depth. And obviously, I can't read every book in the shop. So if someone says, "Oh, I really love this book, what's similar to it?" I might not know that. But if you have an AI that is able to process those books and is able to pick out the key themes, then that's very different. Hi, Jamie.
Actually, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was also thinking for within publishing, comparisons are really important. For anyone who's wanting to go into publishing, who's listening to this, it's very, very important to have a knowledge of the market, of if you're going to kind of be marketing this book, or if you're going to be presenting this book in an acquisition meeting in the editors to say we should buy this book, and well, buy the rights to this book. It's very important to be able to say, because it's like this book and this book and this book, and they've all done really well on the market recently within this year. But the time to read these, it's really hard to get, especially within publishing, because it's so non-stop, really hectic. So to have the ability to use the AI to be like, okay, I'm going to read this book, what's similar to this and why is it similar? Kind of what books can you point me towards? Because I can tell you, there's nothing worse than reading an entire book and then finding out that you've completely wasted your time, because I've done that multiple times, and it takes so much time, and you realize, yeah, you've done that as well. And it takes way too much time out of your day. Mira.
Oh, thank you.
I'll let you
Yeah, I
speak.
agree. I agree, and that goes back to like that conversation we were having about how AI not only could like give the potential to enhance creativity, but also to enhance critical thinking and analytical skills, because it's more about like having a repository of information and knowledge and like easy to access information that we can use to then come up with more like critical strategies, critical analyses that we'll use for having a good knowledge of the market. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, I mean, one point in terms of people reading stuff that they then hate, one genre that is absolutely massive at the moment is romance. And I know there's a lot of people and there's countless like TikTok videos where people recommend books based on tropes. And there's lots of people, myself included, who hate certain tropes in romance books. And it would be really useful, and it would probably make them more tempted to read books if they knew there was a place they could go for recommendations, where you would just see a list and go, oh, I hate that trope, I'm skipping that now. And it could also be really useful in terms of things like trigger warnings, but if there's certain things that people just do not want to read in their books, I'm sure all of us have things where it's like, I just, no matter how great a book might be, I would just never want to read a book that includes like that theme or that issue. And so just to be able to see that.
Yeah, and like with such a wide range of options and so limited time, it's a good way to like help with like our choosing and making the most of our precious time, you know?
Exactly. Well, okay, do we maybe want to think about, on the less optimistic utopian side, what could go wrong? And the first thing that I can think of as just a basic thing, even outside of the whole AI, is just this idea of like bestsellers and predicting bestsellers is already an art that all publishers will admit it's almost impossible to predict. Do we really want to trust an algorithm with predicting what will be bestsellers? Because we know from past experience, data can be biased, and the way people interpret data can be biased as well. And also, like, there's constant surprise bestsellers through word of mouth, and we don't want to over rely on certain ones.
Yeah, I think that's an issue that we should be wary of and be thoughtful of, because like algorithms and hyper personalization and just in general, like if we have an algorithm always predicting these same bestsellers, we have the risk of like getting put into echo chambers, and that would lead to like less diverse content. And yeah, like you said, like it could be anything. It could be a backlist title, it could be a frontlist title.
Exactly. And there's one issue that people on TikTok have been talking about recently as well, where they feel that there's quite a lot of like the idea of like fast fashion in publishing, where books just feel kind of like, not obviously there's loads of incredible books out there still, but the idea that some books just feel like copy and pasted versions of each other because that's what's been popular. And I think that can be an issue if we over rely on just a basic machine system reading what makes a book good rather than a person who reads it and who knows, no, this is the actual special stuff that makes it amazing and why people will love it.
Yeah, we were also talking, so I went to this panel, I think it was called Publishing with Emotion, during the Future Book Conference. And one of the things that they pointed out there was, I mean, this was one of the books I think they were discussing actually. But when it comes to the algorithm, again, there's like, as you said, there's a question of who's the algorithm going to be biased towards. And there's going to be limited pools from underrepresented groups going into this algorithm. And these are the stories that we need out there. But are they ever going to get out there when there's an algorithm that doesn't have that as the kind of main kind of pool that is drawing its resources from? So like a story about queer motherhood, that's probably never going to see light of the day if we're completely just relying on the algorithm.
And one thing that I did have a criticism of the lovely Nadim, not Nadim himself, but just a point he makes in this book, is the idea that he's kind of talking about how AI will be the next form of technology that we can't live without. And he points out that lots of people had fears surrounding mobile phones when they were invented. And he mentions the anxieties around cybersecurity and privacy. And he's right, like now we could never imagine living without those. But we do have to acknowledge that loads of those fears have been realized. And so we do need to, really discuss and voice all of the possible issues with AI now when it's beginning, rather than realizing 5-10 years down the line, oh, those things we were scared of, we should have found ways and measures and means, even if we were still going to use AI, of how to deal with it and how to use it well. And we were kind of discussing before this that one thing that could be useful is if publishers and the Society of Authors has already done this, just agreed very clearly what they would and would not use AI for. And more companies are coming out with statements and declarations, because I think it's really important to have a company-wide decision, because you don't want it to happen that certain employees think they can use AI for certain things and other employees can't. Like we know within our assessments for our masters, there's certain places where you can use AI. You can use AI to summarize what you've already been written for certain assessments, but for the most part, you absolutely cannot. And those are the kind of things that need to be clear from the get-go, so that we kind of agree already, okay, these are the parts of our business that we want to use AI for. These are the parts that absolutely we should not.
One of the things that we really need to do as publishing, like the industry in general, we need to have kind of signaling when something is AI generated. It needs to be very, very clearly signposted. And I think that's the best way to, well, one of the ways that we definitely need to address AI, especially when it comes to copyright and copyright infringement. It needs to be very clearly signposted as AI if we're ever going to potentially think of even using AI in any scenario, because I mean there's a lot of ongoing issues. There's the court case against OpenAI, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
Open-
ongoing case.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
by the number of authors, yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of authors that are currently like having going against OpenAI in a court case to basically say, we know that you have kind of infringed our copyright, you've input our books into your system, most likely, well, actually, almost definitely illegally by torrented kind of websites. And it's going to be a very difficult case to resolve. It's going to be constant, because I think that the best way to go forward, they're going to need to A, own up to what they did, and B, figure out some sort of recompensation. maybe on a sort of royalties basis, if they're going to use their copyrighted content, there's going to be a lot of discussions needing to be had.
Exactly. And one thing I was going to discuss, that again we were talking about before this, was just what do we do as publishers to avoid an influx of writing by AI? And I think pretty universally things might change on this. Publishers have been agreeing we do not want work that's written by AI. Some authors have been going, well, what if like certain parts? But mostly people have been saying no, just if you are submitting work, it should be entirely your own work. And it's the very tricky issue of how do you secure that? Because if you're getting books submitted the whole time, not through agents, how can you test all of those? I know Amazon has recently introduced a new measure where it limits the amounts of books people can upload within a certain time period. So it stops people who are writing books entirely from AI from uploading just like 20 books in an hour and getting money from people buying those ebooks, not realizing how they're written, and then maybe not realizing until they start reading them, like the actual quality. Mira.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, as you mentioned before, like I thought like it is really important to have transparent policies on how AI is being used, but it's also important to like keep those policies updated because everything is changing at such a fast pace. So always staying up to date with new regulations, new policies, and keeping those like policies, like company policies updated is really important.
And I mean, the good thing with AI is that you can do it with that.
Yeah, that's true. Use
it's
AI to fight
solving
the AI.
problems.
No, I'm kidding.
I mean, it can work.
That's when it all starts falling apart Westworld style. It starts fighting against us, trying to shut it down.
But yeah, I was just gonna say also it's really important that we support other parts of the creative industry. So when it comes to like people who are going to be designing the covers and illustrators, I think it's really important that we do support those industries. So in those aspects, I think I mean, forget all the issues with AI drawings with many fingers and I mean, it's getting better each day, but like there's some, you can usually tell when there's AI art involved somehow. So I think it's clear because people get caught out on it. It's very clear that at this point we can still tell when something is AI generated, and I think most people would prefer it to be like done by a human. But just forgetting all of that, I think it's important to know that these are people's careers on the line. And they're already struggling. It's already an issue. And I think as another creative industry, we have to definitely very carefully consider who we're paying to create cover art and whether we're going to let another creative industry just die out like this, which I think would be awful, really.
Exactly, that's a real issue. And also because like we've seen, fan reactions to AI images are very strong and negative. And like I was saying earlier, we want to get these policies in place now because we don't want to realize 5-10 years down the line, oh, we should have supported independent creators, independent designers more. We should have had that. And one massive issue at the moment is one thing that AI is less capable of, as we were saying, like we could get AI to read a whole book, but quite often AI can't fully understand the depths of books and can't in a human way understand it. So one thing you see that with is cover illustrations, and then AI does like quite a random thing. And we found this when for like assignments and in class for interest, we've been told to write in prompts for like what we want AI to create, and you get very different results than if you emailed an illustrator and said, this is exactly what I want you to draw, this is what I'm thinking. AI can't understand that. It's more like a kind of search machine type thing than an actual like human connection. So it's again the idea that like we need to make sure we preserve the human connections and ideas before we suddenly realize we should have done that and it's too late.
I might create a post later on in the week actually with all of the weird things that you get from putting in cover suggestions to AI. It's quite amusing. I'm going to definitely be looking into creating a post on that.
No, I was just thinking of the real highlight of the cover for Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe that I really hope you saved, where Lucy had Aslan's head and was uniquely horrifying but oddly sweet. Just Aslan in a little girl's coat in front of
I've got it somewhere. I take screenshots of everything, especially that. So don't worry, that will feature on my post.
Right, sorry, Mira.
No, it's okay. I was gonna mention the same thing. Like I remember when I was trying to use AI for my assignment, I asked it, give me a background with no eyes, and it gave me a background with eyes. I'm like, I think it literally just computed eyes and gave me eyes. So
Exactly.
it's really a guessing game with the AIs.
Yeah. Also, whenever we were saying create a book cover, it just threw a book in it somewhere. Somewhere in the
Yeah.
image, it's like, have a book.
Here's a book.
Interestingly, some of them were better than others. So I think I found Bing AI was pretty good. Um, what's it called? What is it?
Firefox?
Firefly?
Firefox.
Oh.
Was the most interesting. It was the most creative, using Nadim's language. It was very, very creative, especially with Aslan. But yeah, it's very interesting. I also wanted to just quickly go back to our point earlier about supporting creative industries because we might regret it when they die out. It's exactly the same thing as the printers. We had this one lesson recently, and they were talking about how basically printers in the UK pretty much died out. And we're still having the consequences nowadays with like I think it's with cost, and it's impacted a lot of things, but that's partially because we killed off all of our printing presses because we weren't supporting them. And yeah, we need to keep an eye on that basically when it comes to AI. So these are just a few of the conversations that we've been having about AI recently in our classes, but also generally in the industry. So the Future Book conference that has happened last year, kind of around about October-ish, that was fully kind of largely themed on the AI issue. That's how we met Nadim actually. And the London Book Fair is coming up soon. We're going to be going there. That'll be really exciting. And Lily, you said that they're highlighting it in some way.
Yes, there's going to be multiple events surrounding AI, including at least two, I think, on AI and audio publishing, which is, of course, very interesting in a developing industry.
And also the bookseller is, I mean, I wouldn't say constantly talking about this issue, but it's come up a few times, like within this year particularly, there's been a lot of talk about it. So anyone who's wanting to find out more about this, keep an eye out. It's happening all the time now in publishing. This is a really ongoing hot topic. Keep an eye out on all those places that we've talked about. If you want to go to the London Book Fair, say hello to us if you can see us. We'll be happy to have a chat.
Amy will be volunteering. Mira and I will be wandering about arm in arm with our friends, trying not to get lost.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be hard.
Yeah. So we're gonna end this episode with a little talk on what we've currently been reading because it's not publishing or book selling without talking about books and what we're reading. So does anyone want to share what they've been reading? Amy?
So I have just started reading a recommendation by Mira. It's the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. It's one of my, well, actually, it is my first romance book ever. It's a bit wild to say that. I think quite a few people, it's a big genre.
We've successfully peer pressured Amy into reading a romance book. It has been an effort of many months.
It's
were made to exclude her from many group chats.
It has taken exactly 6 months to tempt me into this. I know because my Amazon subscription ran out the other day, so it's been 6 months. And it's very cozy vibes. It's farmer romance because Mira loves that. And yeah, it's very cute so far. I'm looking forward to it. In terms of something that I've just finished, very different vibes, In Memoriam. Lily's recommendation. I'm just going off
My
recommendations.
book of the year last year. Anyone watching, listening to this, read it. Incredible. The paperback's
100%. A very important book to just read in general if you want to know what's going on in the market at the moment as well. It's queer historical romance set in World War One. It's brilliant. Very sad. I won't give any spoilers. I want to give a spoiler, but I will not.
Don't give a spoiler.
I will not, because some people don't like any spoilers. I like to know a bit about it. If you want some spoilers to know how the ending is, aka happy, sad, I ask your bookseller. They will
That's a
be
DM.
very
I got a bookseller in Manchester at Deansgate. Thank you very much. They were very helpful to spoil it for me before I started reading.
exactly. Some people ask for that, some people don't. But personally, I did need a bit of reassurance because it is devastating. It is really heartfelt. It's very realistic. But yeah, don't go in with it with a faint heart because it is not for the faint-hearted. Very sad, brilliant, very lyrical.
I am currently reading this beautiful proof of A Curse of Blood and Wolves, which is a romantasy retelling of Red Riding Hood, which I am loving at the moment. I'm a bit in, and it's very much fun, especially because I've been reading loads of books at the moment that like I've been needing to read more serious books, and I just needed something that was, a real bit of relief. And then literally last night I finished this. This is The Fellowship of Puzzle Makers by Samuel Burst. Sorry, this is by Melissa McTurn. This is really sweet, really lovely. I just adored it, just about a young man who is traveling, who basically his adoptive mother has died. He's never really known where he comes from, and he always grew up in this place called the Fellowship of Puzzle Makers. That's just a big house where lots of puzzle makers, like jigsaw designers, crossword makers, live together. And it's just him, after his adoptive mother died, figuring out who left him at that house on the doorstep in a hat box, which is just a wonderful detail, and just kind of getting out there a bit and getting beyond the fellowship. Mira, what wonderful, exceptional book did a very, very intelligent and well-read person recommend to you to read?
Okay, I'm going to talk about two books. So the book that Lily is talking about is Love Theoretically. So I am reading that and I am halfway through, and it's a great, great romance book. For anyone who loves Ali Hazelwood, you got to pick it up. I mean, it's a classic. You have to. It's amazing. What else am I reading? I'm also reading Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard. I have it right here. I'm an ebook girly. I read everything on my iPad. And it's great. I'm only 2 chapters in right now, but it's so vivid. It's one of the few books that where I have been able to actually picture like things in my head, because I'm incapable of picturing anything while I'm reading. So it's been great. It's like a movie in my head. And very much Lord of the Rings. It's young adult, an ensemble group of people that you follow, multiple POV. It's lots of fun.
Just giving some other interesting ones that we've read recently, just less recently, but we think you really do need to check these out. There's Only This Beautiful Moment, and if you can see it there, and also Wandering Souls. This is another Lily recommendation. It was a book of the month in January, I believe.
Yes.
Brilliant books, both of them. And I'm going to leave it there. You guys can look these ones up. I'm not going to give you an entire summary because I think you should have a little explore.
Well, if we're allowed to recommend more, I also recently finished reading Butter by Asako Yuzuki, which is a recent book that was a massive bestseller in Japan in, I believe, 2017. And it's finally been translated. It literally came out on the 29th of February, so really recent. It's got a beautiful window at Forest Charing Cross in case you walk by there. And it's basically about a woman who draws men in through her amazing cooking and then may or may not have killed them after. She's been in prison for a couple of years now. No journalist is allowed to get near her. And finally, a journalist at this new magazine manages to persuade her to talk by asking her for her recipes. And it's just the kind of wonderful story of like, it's quite like, not quite, it's quite slow, but like kind of just like a very nice book about their connection, healthy or unhealthy, and them kind of slowly getting drawn into each other's orbit, where it's like things happen, not necessarily massive events, but it's just them kind of going through life, and it just feels very good and realistic in terms of how they actually would influence each other without going full like dramatic serial killer route.
I love the unintentional pun, by the way. Healthy or not healthy when you're talking about food. I love it.
Supporting women's
You know
rights.
what? I will take that. That was so intentional.
If
Yeah.
you're watching via YouTube, let us know in the comments what you're what you're reading at the moment, because you're definitely reading
please do.
something.
We always need recommendations. I mean, you can tell based on our just little chat there, we survive on recommendations. That's basically our food, our bread and butter. Just gonna pun on that again. Okay, everyone, thanks for listening. That's been a really interesting discussion, I hope, about AI. Our next episode is going to be on marketing, and that's going to be our theme for 2 weeks. We're going to be interviewing someone to be determined, and so please listen out for more.
And look forward to our blogging reels. So we will be vlogging our experience at the London Book Fair and posting all over our Instagram. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode.